Welcome to HR Talk by HRLocker. With social distancing measures in place and remote working becoming the norm, many people are feeling isolated from friends and family. Employees are juggling full-time childcare with their 9-to-5 job. This can leave people vulnerable to burnout, and recent studies are showing an increase in depression and anxiety. But what effect does this have on the world of business? And are these issues that managers and employers really need to investigate if remote work is to continue? On today's podcast, we will be talking about the subject of mental health in the workplace. We talk about how employers can make their people feel valued and discuss the best practices for dealing with issues that may arise.
So I'm Christelle Rinn, Head of Product Marketing here at HRLocker, and in today's podcast we will delve into the subject of employee mental health. How important is employee well-being in the workplace, and how will it affect your business long term? On today's show we have JP Taggart and Sean Grant from Core Impact. Sean and JP have worked together for years, and throughout this time they have developed systems and processes built upon their own impact success model to deliver positive outputs. So guys, welcome to the show. I'd love you to tell us a bit about your background.
So really, our business, Core Impact, is a consultancy agency, and we help organizations to engage, enable, and empower their people. And we do that through, that's the process that we use, and we have developed a system and a model called Impact Success, which helps you identify the key areas that we believe can develop a winning culture. So we work with organizations one-to-one with their leaders, their employees, and we do cultural workshops. We have our own podcast, which is called Culture Talks. That's a bit of a plug. And we love working with organizations in long form and short term projects, just genuinely to improve the lives of the people who work for those organizations. Our vision is to become a global influence on developing people. And that's from a personal, a business, and a community perspective. And we're taking steps. We're quite a young organization, but we have bucket loads of experience in terms of working with people one-to-one, managing and leading, more importantly. And we just love what we do, and even through the crazy times that we're all living in at the minute. And that was a nice intro that you gave there. Now more than ever, I think culture in organizations is so important to keep your people bought in, to make sure that you're looking after your people the right way, and to keep those motivation levels up.
Employee mental health is one of these things that companies know they should be taken care of. It's something that's a buzzword at the moment, but if we were to go through, I suppose, a lot of with most companies, they don't really know what they should be doing or what their responsibilities are around mental health. What would be the key areas or responsibilities do you guys think companies should be looking at in terms of mental health for their employees?
You always hear people saying about leaving your problems at the door. So it just doesn't work. That's not what you need to do. People need to bring their whole selves into the organization, and be a big part of that, and have the organization work with them. So the only way we can develop as a team, develop together, and do that deliberately. And I think that's where it worked really well for us, because the people that we brought in and spoke to and were allowed to open up about these things opened up to other people, and then they started to open up, and it became a whole positive cycle. And the reward that we got from that personally, for starters, in being able to support and help them, but the reward the organization got as well, because what we give them, they give back 10 times more for that, and the dedication, the loyalty. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is something that people should be focusing on, and the rewards are amazing for it.
Yeah, so, I suppose that's kind of the important thing, is that it's not just about, obviously, if people have mental health issues and they want to go into the workplace and share that with you, that's something that you need to be aware of and keep that in mind, and put policies and procedures in place to make sure that that's that individual is protected at all stages and that kind of thing. But then on the other hand, it is also encouraging positive mental health in the workforce, and that's a whole separate thing. That exactly like you said, if somebody's doing a good job, just to say thanks a million.
Because it comes into the later sort of picture as well, there, where you're kind of looking at people's well-being rather than, as you say, sort of focusing on that negative. Because I mean, one of the things we would always say as well with organizations is there's a lot of circumstances with the organizations that are people causing negative mental health because of how they operate, because of how they speak to people and deal with people. And I think this is why we always come back to this. We always did come back to culture, and we always do now. And you'll hear us saying culture many times throughout this conversation. But you sort of go back to the question, because we always kind of really differ it off. But sort of go back to the question of like, how do you support mental health? It's about providing that psychological safety, that positive environment for people. It's about communicating really, really well with them and being transparent about it. And it's also about seeking help where you need it yourself.
But if you're a manager and you're only thinking about the bottom line, we had 0 employee turnover for a 2-year period.
Yeah, that's why I think that people are mistaken. Exactly. It does affect your bottom line.
Recruitment costs, we had no recruitment costs for a 2-year period. And anyone who knows anything about recruitment will know it's one of the biggest costs you'll have throughout the year if you have high turnover.
Yeah. So in terms of managers, I totally agree with you that, don't be so naive to think that mental health, or not even mental health, but your well-being and your culture of your people is not affecting your bottom line, because it is. It's affecting how they perform. It's affecting if they're going to stay. It's affecting every part of their day-to-day, whether they're doing a good job or not a good job. And I would say that most companies at this stage will have some kind of policies and procedures in regards to mental health. But in terms of actually fostering good, positive health environment and a positive cultural environment, would you start off with policies and procedures, or would you just start off, do you think, kind of with workshops and chatting and stuff like that, or do you think it needs to be something that goes into your handbook at the end of the day?
So there are a lot of positive steps that people can be taking. As you say, workshops and things like that can also be part of it. But I think it's more what you do day to day. It's going to have the greatest impact. And
just be the way you operate, isn't it? It's just how you do things.
It's how you make people feel as well, and when people feel valued in their job and they really enjoy the role, that makes the world of a difference, because the last thing you want is someone coming home and they've had a disagreement because somebody else was talking about them in the workplace, and they're coming home to that. They're coming home and that's what they're sort of imparting on their children or their husband, their wife, or whatever the case may be. It has a lasting impact what happens in the workplace. It's not just what happens in those 40 hours or whatever it is. It continues on in your everyday life later on that evening and the next day. So workplaces do have an important role to play. You are responsible for your employees, and anybody who says that they're not is going to face extreme difficulties. I don't see them as a long-term organization unless they really invest in their people. And that when I say invest, it doesn't always mean money. It just means time.
Yeah, just because you're remote doesn't mean you can't have that communication. You still have Teams and stuff. We were talking about this earlier. So for those people who are doing, obviously everything's remote at the moment. How would you guys say people should be kind of communicating to their employees at this stage in a positive way?
So normally I would say you can do voice calls and you can do conference calls and whatever, but why would you when you have this? You can pick up your phone and you can do these calls on any platform really. And so there's no real excuse for any organization or employer who's saying, yeah, well, we don't have that capacity. You do. You just need time, as Sean says. You don't have to spend anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's become the and again, new normal, I hate the word, but like it's that is inwardly extremely stressing me out, that I have to try and keep my kids at bay at all stages. So, to get rid of that mental stress, people just have to get on board, and I unfortunately we're very much into Captain Underpants at this stage, so that will mean that my child may walk in a red cape and a white pair of underpants at some stage.
So that's like anything we talk about creating, when you have an actual workplace itself and you're talking about creating a positive environment, people in a remote environment should feel comfortable that that's okay. If you're with an organization who have a problem with your child walking in the room, then that doesn't say much for them. They have the issue, they have the problem. You should be able to do that. You should feel safe that this is your environment you're working in, and whatever happens.
And remote is different. A lot of the time we're in people's kitchens or their bedrooms or something. That's where they're set up, so you are in their homes.
And everybody has different circumstances, as well, different pressures and different things going on every day. So you need to be open to these, and I think people need to be more relaxed about this stuff, and I think they are, to be fair, as well.
So, I mean, if we were to talk, so if you're an employee at home, obviously, I think a lot of companies are investing a lot of time in their culture at this stage, and it's a talked about subject a lot. But as an employee, if you're working in a company and you're feeling stressed or burnt out, it could just be the setting or something in work. If you've gone to your manager and they're not ready to help you, or you don't have that open door facility, what do you suggest people do? Do they just move on, or try to talk to somebody at the top? Or, I mean, as an employee, how much can you actually influence company culture?
Formal leaders are the people who can make decisions, and if they're not on board, they're not going to bring anyone else on board. So it is going to be dictatorship, basically. So yeah, you do need the leaders on board to be able to create a positive culture.
In that setting, you're probably better off giving it a chance and speaking to the person who's directly above you in the structure, and give them an opportunity to try and make it better for you. If they don't, start looking somewhere else.
Yeah, I think unless you're part of the leadership team, it's going to be extremely difficult to change the culture. And then, we spend how many hours every week in of your life in work. So if it's not a positive environment for you, like I envy people who are able to just turn their brain off when they come, that work is one thing and home is another. But for most people, I think that it will have a negative impact on your home life if your work life is awful.
I don't think too many people can switch off completely either. I think it's always somewhere in your mind, no matter what, or impacting your actions at home.
So you both mentioned kind of these subcultures, and I have seen this in companies that you have a great overall company culture, and you've put in this company culture, and everybody, from leadership way, they're living and breathing it. But then it's usually a group of people who maybe have been there for a really long time, and they have their own little subculture, and they're just not getting on board with the new company culture. How do you kind of break down those barriers and kind of bring them along or drag them along with you into the new open, transparent culture?
Within them subcultures, Krista, there's always going to be someone who's kind of the leader.
Ringleader,
and we always say about leaders, there are certain people who are going to be leaders no matter what you do, but are they going to be good leaders or bad leaders? Only people in a positive drive. We always kind of point to you look at a gang has a leader.
Exactly, they can get people to follow them.
There's an influence of that leader there. And actually, the company that JP spoke about, one of the first companies that we worked with, and we stepped away from full-time employment, there was someone in there, and that's in this particular circumstance, she wasn't a bad person, but she was a leader and she was annoyed. She was annoyed with the company. So because she was annoyed with the company, everyone else was getting annoyed with the company because they were following her. So what we found in that circumstance was that once we had an influence on her, that we were able to turn everything else around because people were following her. So once, as the leader, once she was on board and she believed in the vision of the organization and the direction it was going, others followed her. And that's how you kind of start to turn that around. But change takes time. And it's, when there's a culture embedded into an organization or subcultures embedded into an organization, they don't just disappear overnight. They do take time to be worked on. But the fact that a subculture is created in the first place usually means there's probably problems coming from the formal leaders in the organization already. So they need to be on board again, as I said. They have to be on board first before you start creating an overall culture rather than subcultures.
And I think you're right that subcultures are probably coming from because they're banding together against something.
Normally, yeah.
Right.
It's important to understand, and it doesn't have to be somebody who they stand up and they're beating their chest and everyone's following. It could be somebody who is the quietest person in the corner, but they do their job really well and everyone just admires them. So I think it's so important to understand the power of the informal leader, and identifying that. You get them on side, usually they'll do the job for you, like 9 times out of 10.
I think I'd agree with you. If you get them on side, they can become your champion to kind of bring.
That's one of the first courses we actually put together, Krista, was called Cultural Ambassador. It was for that reason. It was focused on informal leaders. And it was just basically teaching them what culture actually is, so that they actually understand what it is, first of all, because it's hard to buy into something you don't understand.
So I think then if you're looking at doing the informal leaders or the ambassadors, as you call it, I mean, you don't want to just be looking at people who are performing the best of their job. It's people who actually can get people behind them, whether they are your favorite person or not.
That's a common problem that you find with the leaders of organizations. That people who've done a good job are put into the position and they're not leaders. They're great workers, great at their job, but they're not leaders.
And what I definitely think that is the key, is that if you want to get people on board, you need to find the people who people are gonna follow. Yeah, that's one
of the best examples we heard there recently was just, you find the leader is the person whenever we say Raiders a night out in the pub.
Yeah.
That's the person that gets everybody to go,
Exactly. No. So I suppose the last thing I kind of want to go through is
there's a lot of kind of worry out at the moment. People aren't really sure, if they're going to go back to work or how work is going to look like when they go back to work. And, even ourselves, we're looking at opening the doors to our offices, getting people in, and it's different. We've got yellow signs everywhere saying, remember social distance. We've got, different things all over the place. And we still want to have a positive work environment that isn't scary or freaking people out. So what would you think if you're opening places up? Some people maybe come back with masks or visors or dividers or that kind of thing. How do you go about still having that positive work environment? There's $1 million question for you.
I would say first and foremost, just communication. Communication is key.
We've written a paper alongside someone else where we sort of investigated different circumstances that had happened in the past and people returning to work after difficult circumstances, like 9/11 and things like that we looked at. One of the things we found, talking about the mental health side of things, one of the things we found throughout all of that was that leaders are facing the same circumstances as everyone else coming back. They've had to go through lockdown and all the difficulties that have come with that, and everybody's coming into this from a different perspective. Some people enjoy being off and getting 80% and having a bit more time with their kids. Other people really struggled and may have been impacted by coronavirus or by the death of family members or things like that. So there's so many different circumstances coming back, and we need to be open to that. Any leader in an organisation needs to be open to that. It's okay setting the place up with a PPE and making sure there's safety in that respect, and that needs to be done. It is important, but it's important not to forget that people still need your focus, they still need your attention, and we need to give that time over to people. We need to still allow them to see that, whether they're still working remotely or whether they come back to the workplace, that there still is a clear vision there. We need to be transparent about that. Where are we now and where are we going? What's the next steps? And that communication piece is really important.
And that's it. It's like with people coming back, this is what I've been telling kind of our customers have asked us, that you need to start talking to people. We don't know. Do they have childcare? No one knows. Have they had coronavirus? Have somebody in their household had it? Have they lost somebody? Are they minding a parent who they're afraid that if they go into the workplace, they're now going to bring it home, or so these are circumstances that none of us have ever dealt with. Exactly. And that's okay that people are worried.
Yeah. Whatever, as long as you have an open policy of, I'm going to try my best here. We're in this together. Remember, I don't jump down your throat when you don't finish your targets on time, and we work up to the next point. It's a two-way communication. You need to understand that we're all in this together, and just make sure that you, as Sean says, you will end up relying on the relationships that have been built prior. And the organizations who are struggling most at the moment getting things back up and running are probably the organizations who, from a people perspective, haven't built a culture of inclusivity. And it's the dividends of the organizations who are now paying out in people being a bit more understanding that they are feeling comfortable enough to come forward and say, do you know what, I don't feel that I'm ready to come into work. Can we have a chat about this?
Personally, I had a discussion with Adam, our CEO here, and he said, when are you coming back to the office? And I said, I'll be really honest, it's when the kids go back to school. Because if they're not back to school still in September, they're still going to be at home. Exactly. I'd love to come back into the office tomorrow, but
these are the realities of what's happening. That's just the way it is, isn't it? But what is, in terms of culture, we were saying, any culture that's existed in the past, if you maybe haven't been up to scratch in the cultures you've had, this is a great time to put in place. It's a great time to start putting the foundations in place, because a lot of what's been done in the past, maybe because everyone hasn't been together, can be forgotten. I wouldn't say forgotten, but you can move on from them a lot easier, let's say. And you can start building new habits and new routines and new ways of doing things.
There's no greater time to promote a positive change.
There's so much change going on anyway, we don't know.
Change the record and say, do you know what? We've had enough of all the external crap that's going on outside. We as an organization see where we want to go. We want you to be part of it. Not only do we want you to be part of it, but this is where you fit into that overall vision. Here's the core values that we're trying to promote, and we expect that if we use them on our day-to-day workings, you should use them. And it's as simple as that. There's a lot more to it, but it's as simple as that. If you condense it down, if you get that part right, you're probably aiming in the right direction.
great to have you guys on, and we'll have all your details, your contact details, with the podcast as well. So again, if anybody wants to contact JP or Sean, we'll have all their details. Go to LinkedIn, find them, look at Culture Talks after you've listened to this podcast, obviously. But thanks so much for being with us, guys. It's been really good.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, Crystal.